In our previous lesson, we looked at how to make a component, and what we did was we constructed a building, and the building had multiple circular windows. And these circular windows, there were multiple of them, which meant that if we wanted to change the properties of one of these windows, or of these windows, we had to do each one individually. But what we did was we learned how to make a component of one window, and then we changed the window, or this individual window, we made copies of this component, and then we could change one to change all of them. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to look at how, in sort of two separate examples of how components can be useful. Now it's quite tempting. What we have here, we've got a picket fence, which is quite often in front of people's houses or on the side, and it's quite beautiful. It's quite popular in England and America, places like that. And it is quite tempting to make this whole object a component, which is possible. We can make all of this a component, but what is time consuming is that if we realize actually what we want is we want these slats here to be slightly wider, okay, or the color needs to be different, we need to change each one individually. And again, what we have with components, we talk about having a repeated structure, which then if you've got to make some changes, it is much quicker if you make one a component, and then when you change this component, it changes all the others. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to practice making a component and then copying and pasting it. Okay, and we've got a picket fence, and here we have a gazebo. So a gazebo, this gazebo has a repeated shape as well, and we're going to look at that. Now, the other thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at accuracy as well. Now, what I hoped I did was, I'm hoping that my gazebo, these beams that we have running across, these beams, are actually evenly spaced. Now, if I were to do this as a designer, I would probably measure these out to ensure that they are accurate. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to try and make sure that we use SketchUp to try to ensure, or certain design skills, that's going to try to ensure that the distances between each one is the same. So let's get started. Okay, so in your folder there should be a document called, I'm actually going to change the name, but this document is called Making Components Exercise, and this is the start, but I'm going to change that name, and the name of the file will appear on your screen, or on the screen, and you can find it in your file. So if you can download it, move it to your ICT folder, and then open it. Okay, so the first thing we'll notice is that what I've done is I have simplified some of the work that you need to do, and I have erected these already. I've designed these pillars with the beams running across, and all you need to do is these cross beams that go across here, you need to make these a component and copy them and so on. So it shouldn't take particularly long. But what we're going to do is we're going to ensure that we look at trying to avoid making errors, and also obviously learn how to make a component. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to look at our wooden slat that we've got here, and the first thing we've got to do is we've got to check and make sure that it is accurate. This slat should be touching this panel here, and we've got to make sure that is correct. Okay, so let's have a look. It looks like it is, so that should be accurate. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to make this a component. So please use your shortcuts. Okay, and in fact, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to click on this, and you can see that it's a component. Now, how do we know that it is a component? Well, we know this because if I click on this panel here, you can see that I can click on individual sections like the edge, the face, etc. Whereas if I click on this, you can see everything is outlined in blue, and that indicates to me that this is a component. So now if I double click on this, you can see I can now edit the component. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to we're going to change the property of this. Okay, and we can change the appearance of this panel. We're going to edit it, but before we do that, the first thing I would like us to do is to actually look at how to make sure that the panels that I copy across, first of all, is evenly spaced, and also making sure that I have equal distance between each one. So again, what I can do is I can actually measure where the panels need to go. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy. Now again, if you've got a Mac, you can't do this. Okay, so with a Mac, you just got to press Control C, Control V, and you have to move it in place. Now the difficulty is that when I move this, it is possible that it's actually away from the panel. So I'm going to put that one in the wrong place, and you'll see that it's not actually touching the wood. And we've got to make sure that that is in the correct place. Okay, so you've got to play around with your view a little bit to make sure that, so if you do something and it doesn't go into place, just change the angle of what you're viewing, and that should be easier. Now, if you have a Windows computer, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to click on our component, we're going to click Move, and then Control, and then Drag. Okay, now what you want it to say is it needs, it's quite difficult to see, but you should see that there's a red dotted line, which means that now it's running across this face here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing the second one close to the first one, I'm going to put it here on the right. Okay, now once I've got that, what I can do is I can find the middle. Okay, I can find the middle, and the middle we can probably find by moving across. We can see there's the midpoint. Okay, so here we've got our midpoint, and we can delete this obviously if we want, but all I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Move and Control, and I'm going to move this one across, and I'm going to put it in the middle of that one. So now I've got the middle of that. Now I just repeat that. I find the middle of this one, middle of that, and I can find the middle of that, and so on. So just repeat that. Now if we want to make sure it's really accurate, then possibly you can do the middle of what we've got there, but we're just going to do that, and that's fine. And then we're going to do this one in between those two, and then we're going to copy that and move it in between those two. Okay, make sure the line is red. We've got a red line there, and then the next two is going to go here and here. Alright, so let's edit this component. Let's change the properties of this, and what I want to do is I want this to come out sort of roughly here. Okay, out here, and what I want is I want this to be rounded, not squared like this. I want to round this. Now, alright, so a very common mistake that people do is this. They go into, or not, they don't go into the component to edit it, they actually edit on the outside of the component. So they click here and here, and they're going to do an arc like that, and then they try to edit it. Okay, we click here and they say, oh, I can't edit, I can't change it. And you can see it's actually not repeating the shape on the others. So that's actually a mistake. So what we've got to make sure we do is we double click. Now I'm going to change the view a little bit. I'm going to zoom in first of all. Too many of you are zooming out and you're working too far back. Zoom in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click. Okay. And I'm going to put an arc which is in line with this panel and this panel here. And I'm going to put it, so I'm going to start here. This is the start. This is the end. I'm going to pull it in a little bit, not too much. Okay, so that's fine. And again, you can type in the distance if you want, but it says 0.02, so I'm going to click that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to remove this. Now, quite instinctively, what people want to do is they might select this and then they'll click delete, and they think, okay, it's not actually working. But what we need to do is we actually need to push this in, and that will delete it for us. But before we do that, I would like to make sure I do the same shape on this side, and again you can either draw a line and then delete the line afterwards, which I might do if I'm going to work accurately. But what we're going to do is we are going to click here, bring it across, and make sure it's 0.02. Okay, I'm actually going to type it in this time, 0.02. Sorry, 0.02, enter, and okay, there we go. So this distance here is the same as this one. So like I said, we're not going to delete it. What we do is, we are going to delete it, but we delete it by pushing this shape in until it disappears. Okay, and then you do the same on this side. So we click on the shape, we click push, and we push it in until it touches this side, and then it disappears, and then we've got that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do exactly the same here at the top of our shape. Okay, now the next bit is a little bit tricky, because what we've got to do is we've got to draw sort of a semicircle here, or an arc around here, and then we delete or push this section here. So this is a bit tricky, so you may have to do a couple of times, you may have to undo your work to get it right, and it might be that the two sides are not perfect, but that's fine. So double click here, and we're going to do the same on this side, and again just try to find a point which is the same as the other side. Okay, so you can see here it's not going to work, so I've got to undo that one. I've got to undo it because it needs to be right on the edge. There we go, that's perfect. So let's just check that that's correct. So I need to select that. Yes, perfect, it selects that. I'm now going to press push, and we're going to push this shape all the way through, and that deletes that one, and we're going to do the same on this one. Okay, so zoom in, select, and then we push, and there we go. Alright, now we're not going to do color now, we're going to leave the color until the end. Okay, and this is my picket fence. Now we could obviously do, what I suggest you do is if you do this one first, so pause the video at this point, copy what I've just done, okay, but if you have sort of paused and copied and paused, then that's fine, and we're going to move on to this, but don't do color on this one now. Now on this next one, what's going to be different is on this one I copied the first one, I pasted at the end, and then I copied individually. Now that took a bit of time, so we're going to try to see if we can copy multiple items, if that helps us to save time. Okay, and we're going to do that in a second. So again, what I've got here is I have two objects, and they're both components. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to ensure I'm going to copy these two, and I'm going to spread them along this cross beam here. So let's do this quickly. So I don't know if you remember, but in order for me to select multiple items, so if I want to select these two and I want to copy them, I select the first one, I hold Control on my keyboard, you can see there's a little plus next to my pointer, mouse pointer, and I click on the second one, and now I've selected these two. And again, if you've got a Mac, it's just Control C, Control V, but I have a window, so I'm going to click Move, and now I can click on this and I can drag it. Now again, you would just have to go by sight and judge whether that is correct. That looks okay. I think that looks okay. Alright, but again, it might be easier if we do the right hand side, then the middle, and so on, but we're going to do it like this, and that's fine, that's not a problem. But we're going to check that these seem equal, because I'm now going to select 4 of them and then copy and paste. So let's just see if that looks okay. I think that looks alright. These two could probably go left just a little bit. Yep, there we go. Oh, sorry. There we go. Now our problem is it's moved, hasn't it? Yes. So this is what we've got to make sure we don't do. So let's just move this again. It's just a little bit, I think. And maybe a little bit more. Yep, there we go. Okay, so just make sure that these 4 are perfect, because we need to first of all check that they're in line. Okay, because sometimes we move it this way or that way, so just check that that is correct. And what we're going to do now, instead of copying just 2, we this time going to copy 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now if your control doesn't work, maybe on the Mac, you can just choose Shift and you can select multiple. So I'm going to copy these ones, and I'm just going to repeat it all the way to the end. So you can just pause here if you want. I'm going to zoom through this quickly and make sure that I do this as quick as possible. Okay, so the only thing I don't like is the fact that you can see here the distance from there to there is very, very different from this one. So personally, actually it just looks like I need to add maybe 2 more, maybe 1 more. Okay, so let's just move that. There we go. And you can see that it looks much better because it seems to be in line. Okay, so now we've got our beams and we need to change our beam like we did earlier. And so there's a couple of things we're going to do. We're first of all going to add a shape here, sort of an arc again to go from there to there, and then we're going to push this through. But remember, we've got to edit the components, we've got to double click, okay? And what we're going to do is we are going to add an arc from here, let's say to there, and I think it's quite nice having it here, not all the way here to the edge, but you can choose how you want it. We're going to do that. Remember to double click to edit it, just a reminder, and then we're going to click on that, we're going to orbit around, and we are going to push this all the way through, and there we go, and we've got our cross beam, and that looks actually pretty good. That looks quite good. Alright, now the next bit is quite tricky because we've got to go quite close to edit. We're going to add these sort of attachments that hold the beam in place. Okay. Now again, I should probably have done this on the first one, and again we learned from our mistakes. I should have done it on the first one because well, actually I don't need to, but the problem is that what I've got is on the other end I'm going to do the bolts or the attachments here, but I can't reach this side. So what I've got to do is I've got to come to this one and edit this one over on this side to ensure that it looks the same as what I have on this side. But anyway, so let's get started on this. This one is a little bit tricky to do, so we've got to go nice and close. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a rectangle here. Okay, perhaps maybe to there. We're going to add a, well actually what might be easier is we're going to pull this out. So we're going to click here and we're going to pull this out to about there. Okay, and then we're going to put another rectangle here at the bottom. Okay, so maybe across there, and then we're going to pull this bit out this way. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at that. I think this is a bit thick, this one. It's a little bit thick, so I don't know, I'm going to reduce that, and I'm just going to, I think that looks better. Yes, I think that looks better. Alright, and then what I'm going to add is I'm going to add 2 screws that are going into the wood here and here, and all we're going to do is we're going to add some circles. Maybe there. I don't like the position of it, so I'm just going to move it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to copy it. There we go, and I can copy this one again, and I can copy this one again. Okay, and again we can make it look a little bit more realistic by possibly just pulling it out. Problem is that it's not going to pull out just a little bit, it's going to pull out quite a bit. Okay, so unless we type in what we want, so 0.005, maybe we can do that, and then I'm going to do the same on this one, 0.005, enter, and then we've got something that looks like that. I think those are too big. They're too big, but that's fine. Okay, it's just for illustration. You can always undo yours and you can redo it. 0.005, and the same here, 0.005, and there we go. Now what I could do is I could select this, okay, and I can copy it and paste it, and I can do the same on this side. Just bring it across, Control V, this time I copied and pasted. That looks alright. And now the problem is, now if you look carefully, it's done it on each one of those. I think that's too bulky, but actually it might look a bit nice. So that's fine. So what I'd like you to do is, can you copy that? And I'm going to actually continue with this, but you can just watch what I'm doing, or you can do it on your own. I'm going to repeat those shapes on this side to ensure. Okay, and there we go. So now what you can do is you can add color to your component, and we can again do this nice and quick. Okay, so there we've got our gazebo finished. I know it's not completely finished, there's still a few sections that I need to add color, and I'm sure that after you have completed your work, I'm sure you would be able to think of a quicker way of doing this. But this is what we've done. Make sure that you change the color of this end of this beam as well, and then you are finished. Please remember also to save your work. You should have been saving as you were working, and then upload your work into Teams.